Good afternoon. We have Lakeside Middle School, right? Coming to us from Washington. Excellent. Well, I'm Jen Howell. I am the co-executive director of Virginia Civics. We are the home of the Virginia We the People program. And I'll pass on to my fellow judges.
My name is Tom Tinder, and I'm an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
Hello, my name is Emmanuel Caudillo. I'm a senior advisor with the White House Hispanic Prosperity Initiative in Washington, D.C.
And you are?
We are Team Madison. We represent Mr. Bannister's 7th period class. I'm Danica Ferris, and did you know that throughout both of James Madison's terms as president, his vice presidents actually passed away? He had to finish his 2nd term without a vice president.
I'm Lily Dotson, and did you know that James Madison was the first official graduate of Princeton University?
I am Mackenzie Elder, and did you know James Madison was 17 years older than his wife Dolly, whose favorite ice cream was oyster ice cream?
Excellent. And your teacher is?
Mr. Jim Bannister.
So did you know that I am 3 miles from James Madison's Montpelier right now?
That's really cool.
The historic home. Yes. I worked there for 12 years, so it is near and dear to my heart. All right, I'm going to read the question in its entirety, and time will start whenever you're ready. Doing question 1 today. In the Virginia plan, James Madison proposed proportional representation in both houses of Congress. The delegates rejected Madison's proposal in favor of the Great Compromise. What is the Great Compromise and how was it justified? Do you think the founders' justification is acceptable today? Why or why not? What are the advantages and disadvantages of equal representation in the Senate? What are the advantages and disadvantages of changing the Senate to proportional representation?
According to Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution,
all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives.
At the Philadelphia Convention, the problem about each state would be represented was a big issue, and the delegates at the convention hadn't been able to come to an agreement about how to fix it.
After a long, sweaty, sweltering, humid summer in Philadelphia, Roger Sherman delivered the Great Compromise. This involved combining key elements of both the New Jersey and Virginia plans to a bicameral or 2-house legislature.
The founders' justification has proven to be acceptable in today's society because of this great effort by our framers. Today, this is our legislative branch, also known as Congress.
Let's analyze these plans to become one of the bedrocks of our legislative branch today.
The larger states brought the Virginia plan to the table, and the smaller states brought the New Jersey plan to the table.
The Virginia plan, led by James Madison, was the genesis of today's House of Representatives, which is described under Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution.
As stated, it is based on proportional representation, which simply means that the bigger the state, the more representation it will have.
However, there was a disagreement. They formed a committee of delegates to decide the best way to represent the states in Congress.
Let's move on to the Senate, which is based on equal representation.
The New Jersey plan, proposed by William Patterson, supported the small states, the commencement of what we today call the Senate, described in Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution. Within the Senate, each state will be equally represented by having 2 senators.
The advantage is that no one state will be overpowered in Congress, as far as the Senate is concerned, because of being represented equally.
The bigger states would be in charge of Congress if we didn't have equal representation in the Senate. For instance, the states with farms or plantations often had smaller populations than the states with larger metropolitan population centers. These farm-friendly states wouldn't be heard and thus would not receive the funding they needed to keep their farms supplied and properly maintained.
Let's take a closer look at this equal representation in the Senate. Wyoming has as much say as California. However, you can make the argument that Wyoming, per citizen, has more voice than each citizen in California, simply because those 2 senators are speaking for less people, and each person has a better opportunity to be heard. To be exact, Wyoming has a larger per capita voice per person than the most populated state in the Union, California.
This creates a huge disadvantage for the more populated states, as each person is less likely to be heard.
This means that very large states like California will be represented on the same level as small states, The House of Representatives, however, provides for a balanced correction, with the larger states having more representation.
Essentially, the minority can rule the majority, the opposite of what a democratic republic is intended to be.
A stop measure tactic created by the Senate is the filibuster, which prevents bills from easily passing. It requires a supermajority of 60 votes to pass legislation, a technique believed to prevent misrepresentation from occurring.
A smaller state would not have their votes squandered by the more populated states, as a supermajority would require bipartisan participation and thus the minor voice heard.
This is the magic spell of the Great Compromise. Both large and small states have their opportunity to speak and be represented within their particular houses of Congress.
If the Senate became a proportional representation, it would become too large and ineffective. With a smaller Senate, there are less outlier votes.
Without the need to filibuster the proportion of the moment, this concludes our presentation.
Excellent, thank you. We have some follow-up questions now. So let's take it back to Washington, and how does equal representation in the Senate work out for you guys?
I would say equal representation in the Senate works out for us. Well, not particularly us because we can't vote yet, but as Washington State, it allows it so that, I don't know how to phrase it. I'm sorry. Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Washington isn't necessarily a giant state, but it's not a small state either. So, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of Washington within a system of equal representation in the Senate?
One of the advantages of Washington having equal representation is that we have as much say as California, which is a bigger state with more people. But a disadvantage is that they don't have as much say per se, or yeah.
I believe what my colleague is trying to say is that every person is looked at as their state in a way, and every person gets represented. Whereas in the House of Representatives, it could be like not super equal, and the smaller states could get squandered.
To add on to what my colleague said, is that with smaller states such as Washington, it's kind of a medium-sized state. The people have more representation because we are smaller, and there are 2 senators representing us, as in if California, it's a much larger state, and there's only 2 senators representing all those people there.
You mentioned about bipartisan. We have 2 major political parties in the United States. And some other countries have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 major political parties. Should we have more political parties in the United States? Why or why not?
I think that we should, I think having 2 parties would be is enough for us, because I feel like if we had more, then things might not go as they go now, so it might not be equal in, say, representation for the people.
Go ahead.
I believe that it would be better if we had more parties. I believe that if we had more parties in our country, that there would be more compromise and less division between just the 2 parties.
I would like to add on to what my colleague Max said. And if you take into perspective the election of 1860, where the Democratic parties both split, it made it so that they didn't win what they wanted with the election. And so I agree with my colleague Mackenzie that if we were to have more parties, it would make everything much more diverse and split up and make it harder to go upon things professionally.
Well, I'm going to ask the next question here. And so pretend you're on the driver's seat, and if you're able to make changes or not, most importantly, I'm interested in your opinions on this. Should we change the Constitution to make representation in the Senate based on population? Why or why not?
I don't think that we should have changed the Senate to have it based on population. If we did that, then these smaller states wouldn't, they wouldn't.
I believe what my colleague is trying to say is that they wouldn't be able to get their voice into what we need to go on. Like, for example, we mentioned Wyoming and California. If that were the case, then Wyoming, they'd just kind of be sitting over on the side by themselves. In California and the very highly populated states would basically just rule all of the US.
To add on to what my colleague said, if we were to change to just representation being based on population, the smaller state, so the minority wouldn't be heard as much. The majority would take over more. They'd take over more of the representation, so they'd be represented more than the smaller states, the minority.
So why do you think it's important for states to have representation? I mean, the Constitution starts "we the people." So why do the states need representation in Congress?
I think the states help divide up. So if someone wanted to do something that might be illegal in one state, they could go to another state and it would be perfectly legal there. It helps balance it so that not everyone has to agree on one thing, and different states can have slightly different laws based on what the people in that area want.
We have one state, Nebraska, that just has one legislative body. They're unicameral. Why do you think other states and all other states have have two bodies, both a House and a Senate? Why do you think more states have not followed Nebraska's example and just had one legislative body, a unicameral legislature?
I feel like more states haven't followed what Nebraska has done because they just don't see the high points in it. And there's probably more cons than there is pros when having a only one house. And yeah.
I agree with my colleague.
Oh, excellent. So we may get my question might be the final question here. So let me go. Let's see. You mentioned in regards to that states who had the rural, had the farms were more protective in with representation than with the cities because it was meant to protect the interests of the farms. Do you think that's still true today in regards to that equal representation? Is it not just to protect the interest of small state, but also like the industries like farms or other things? Is that true today, or is it just different?
I think it still holds true today in our current state.
I agree with my colleague. If you take in, for instance, per se, Washington, we do have a lot of farms here. We're known as the place of the apples. So
Go on, finish your thought.
Okay. So there's some parts of Washington that are smaller than others. For instance, Spokane and Seattle. Seattle's a very large metropolitan city center, and so the smaller parts like Spokane still get their representation of the farms and whatnot, and Seattle still gets their representation of the city folk.
All right. Well, good job. You guys are storytellers, aren't you? I really like that you guys started out telling us a story, and not only telling us the story, but I mean, you acted out the story. That was awesome. I have literally never seen that before in a hearing, and I just really appreciated that approach. I really liked the way that you sort of framed out the Virginia and New Jersey plans. You really set the stage nicely there. And I liked some of the examples that you gave in the opening. I think in the follow-up, try to bring in even some more examples, and we're getting there sort of at the end, but you know, we want to hear what your opinion is and then why that's your opinion, right? So that all of that evidence is kind of leading into the why you think the way that you do. And I know that you all have some really great ideas, and we heard some of that come out. We want to hear even more of those. So I am really excited about continuing our conversation tomorrow.
I agree completely with Jen's comments about the opening. It was very creative, very innovative. Not only with the props that you had, but I really liked the short, punchy remarks that you made, and you moved from one to the other. It was sort of like a documentary or a webinar, documentary on the Constitution and on our constitutional convention. I also commend you for your utilization of examples, because those examples that you gave highlight the points that you're making. And I would just suggest to you, when you're making the points, that you give us both the point and maybe the counterpoint. In other words, you say, I believe this, or it's my opinion of this. And then you might go on and say, now, we did consider the other side of the argument, but we feel that the position we took is the correct position because of this or that. And you could also, as I said, give us the other side with points about that. You all are the experts. That's what this We the People program is all about. You're coming as a panel of experts to appear in front of us, members of Congress. And you certainly have all the knowledge to give us both sides, or 3 or 4 sides of an argument or of a particular issue. Please continue to use your knowledge and your leadership that you've demonstrated today within your school and within your community and within your state. We need to have leaders like you in the future. Congratulations to you, and thank you very much.
I'd like to commend you on a great presentation. Enjoyed the creativity, enjoyed how you're able to just lay down just the different facts and your points during this presentation. One thing to enhance is something that you were doing at the end. Well, there's 2 things. One is I saw Danica, you came in for the save during the question and answer period, and that shows great teamwork. It shows that sometimes it's happened to me before where it's like, oh no, I can't get the answer out. I'm glad I have a teammate who came in and backed me up. And so good job on seeing that and be able to support that. But in addition, also continue to share things that are from your areas into these questions, because it's about your opinion, but also what you see. That's why I like in that last answer about, you're saying, well, the interest of the apple farmers in Spokane, that they're still being represented despite the more population that lives in the Seattle area. And so that's really good. Use that local to your advantage, local information and local experience to your advantage in this, because it's in the We the People, we want to have that. That puts more depth and breadth into the topic. So thank you so much once again for your presentation.
I'll say also, just I appreciate that Madison is also your hero. And if I could walk across the room right now, I would go get my James Madison action figure to show you, because we have that in common.